This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Scott Howell.
Hello, good neighbors, and welcome to the Good Neighbor Podcast, brought to you by the Friends and Neighbors Group of the greater Chattanooga area, everywhere from Cleveland down to Dalton and all the surrounding areas. Glad to have everybody with us this morning. My name is Scott Howell, and I'm your host. For all you first-time listeners out there that might be wondering, the purpose of the Good Neighbor Podcast is to bring awareness to the residents living in our communities regarding the locally owned and or operated businesses in the greater Chattanooga area, all the way, like we say, from Cleveland to Dalton and the surrounding areas. Small local businesses are the backbone of our communities, and they need our support. And joining me today, we have our good neighbor, Chris Pridgen of AdvantaClean of Chattanooga. So thanks for being our special guest this morning on the podcast, Chris.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure, sir. And we're excited and want to find out all that you offer there at AdvantaClean to our listeners. But before we jump into the business part of it, would you like to share anything with us about yourself and your family?
Sure. So my name's Chris Pridgen, owner of AdvantaClean of Chattanooga. I moved here 4 years ago from Charlotte, North Carolina. We live in Hickson, Tennessee. Have two young boys, Charlie and Grayson, and my wife, Courtney.
Okay. Well, glad to have you all in the Chattanooga area. So you moved from the big city of Charlotte. I didn't realize what a big city that was till I visited there one time, and I was like, whoa. I didn't know Charlotte was this big. I thought it was more like Chattanooga, but it's it's a big city.
Oh yeah, it was getting a little too big for us. And my wife and I grew up in Mississippi, so we were trying to get halfway home and
okay.
We landed in Chattanooga.
Well, it's a good place to land. Good place to land. Well, I tell you what, let's just dive in and tell me all about AdvantaClean of Chattanooga.
Sure. So we're a restoration company that includes mold restoration, water restoration, fire restoration. We do commercial air duct cleaning, some residential air duct cleaning, and then we do a lot of crawlspace repair and moisture control, water management, and crawl spaces.
Okay. So you say you do not only the water damage, you also do fire damage.
Correct. We'll do the fire cleanup. We don't do any build back. So, if we did have to do demo in any of those service lines, we do have contractors that we refer out to help us put it all back together.
Okay. All right. So you do, once they come in and kind of clean up and get it ready for them to come back and put it back in place.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. But tell us about your journey, Chris. You came here from Charlotte. Did you come with AdvantaClean, or did you find AdvantaClean after you got here?
Well, I grew up in Mississippi, went down after college and worked Katrina, did commercial construction down there for a couple of years. Then I got tied into a company named Geldwin, a manufacturing company, manufacturing doors and windows, but moved up to Knoxville for a little while, got transferred up to Charlotte. After that, I got burnt out working in the corporate world, and one of my good friends had just opened an AdvantaClean in Charlotte and York County, South Carolina. And so he asked me to come work for him. AdvantaClean is a franchise, so he bought one of the franchises. So I started working for him, and we grew that franchise into a pretty big one. And then once I moved to Chattanooga, had a couple of job interviews and realized it was time for me to do something myself.
Okay. And why did you choose AdvantaClean? Is it just because you already knew it from your friend working, or tell us about that?
Yeah. So, I had a lot of experience. I worked for my friend Gibbon in Charlotte for 5 years. I had a lot of experience in it. I really enjoyed it. I grew up working construction and working on a farm, and it's just the right thing for me. I'm not going to be sitting behind a desk or in an office all day. It's good to be out in the field and doing what we're doing. I really enjoy it. And we get to see, something bad that happened to somebody, and then we make it better. And so that's I really like to see that, helping somebody, from a disaster situation, or say their crawl space is in really bad shape, and then fixing those problems.
It's kind of very rewarding feeling, I guess, to know you help somebody get back in their home and things like that.
Yes.
So for all our listeners out there who may not be aware of a franchise, Chris said this is a franchise. That doesn't mean that it's a corporation. That his location, the Chattanooga, he is the owner. I think some of the advantages a franchise has is they provide you with some things that someone who builds from scratch has to provide themselves. I think that's kind of what I understand. So I just want everybody to know, because we're all about, promoting local companies. The AdvantaClean may not be a local corporation, but Chris Pridgen of AdvantaClean of Chattanooga is local. So just want everybody to understand that.
Correct. Yes. Locally owned and operated. The only thing the franchise, that they help me with my website and help me with like a call center setting appointments and that. Otherwise, I'm 100%. Every decision made is mine.
Yeah, I like for people to understand that, because, at the Good Neighbor podcast, that we're all about trying to help promote the locally owned businesses. So I just wanted to explain to them that you are a local owner. You just happen to be they call a franchise, So, but talk to us a little bit about the myths and misconceptions that people have around what you do. They have some water damage. They maybe don't know how to take it serious enough, because there's so many things that happen after the water goes away that we can't see all the time. So help us with some of those things that people have, those misconceptions.
Right. So say you had a leak and you're on a active supply line, and depending on how much water, how long it ran and how much water it ran, there's a big misconception that, hey, we can just dry it out with a fan. Well, you don't know where that water could have gone under your hardwoods, could have gone behind cabinets, could have soaked into drywall behind cabinets. And all those things need to be dried out properly for mold growth not to set in. Or, say water got under your hardwoods. Well, it looks dry. You wiped it up with a towel. But actually the subfloor underneath that hardwood is still wet. And in a couple of days, you're going to see some damage to your hardwood. It could start cupping and really damage that hardwood, where we could get in and dry those things out properly, quickly, to prevent that further damage to the house.
Yeah, I shared this once before. So a lot of times, we hear about mold, we hear about things like that, but maybe don't totally fully understand the seriousness of it. But I knew a gentleman that that the story that I was told, I didn't get it directly from him, but a good friend of his was also a friend of mine. And the story was, he bought a car that had been had flood damage, and he didn't know, he wasn't aware of it, the flood damage, and he bought it. And so underneath the carpeting and upholstery, there was mold. And he didn't know it, and not only mold, but we hear about the black mold. And the story was, medically speaking, he was diagnosed. He'd got this mold on his brain, but from breathing this mold, day in and day out, it got on his brain, and he was dying. I mean, he was unable to take care of himself anymore. He was bedfast. His wife was having to take care of him, and so it's a serious issue. To just take water damage for granted. It's a very serious issue for not only our life, but our health, our overall health. So, I just want to state that, because I want everybody listening to understand it's very serious.
I've definitely had examples in the past where, we went in to inspect a house. The owners were having symptoms, their whole family, and couldn't find anything much in the house on a visual inspection. And then we had a testing company come in and find high counts of a mold called Stachybotrys, which is what everybody calls black mold. Did some further investigations and found out that like a whole exterior wall was totally rotted out, that you couldn't see from the inside. On the flip side of that too, you know, you have to really trust who's doing your inspections in my line of the business. Cause I mean, people can feed off that fear factor, and say, hey, you need to move out of your house, when it might just be a smaller problem that we can fix.
Give me an example of that, if you don't mind, Chris.
So, say you did you thought that you were having symptoms of mold, and you had a company that comes in and did testing. We don't do any testing. We use a third-party company to do that, because it's a conflict of interest. If we come in, do the testing, tell you have a problem, we do the work, and then test ourselves afterwards. And so say you have a company that does restoration like I do, and they test it and they say, hey, yeah, we got to move out the house and we got to demo half the house. Well, those testing results might not be, if you don't know how to interpret those testing results, you really might not have a huge problem, and the company might be trying to get work.
Have you seen that happen before, Chris? Are you
Yes.
Are you relying on some experience you've had?
I've seen it happen a lot. Yes, sir. Okay.
All right. Well, that's interesting, because nobody likes to be taken advantage of. That's for sure.
So, yeah. And so, you just, that's why we use a third party testing company, especially on interior. Now, if you're getting in a crawl space, I mean, there's, you're going to see that visually, and anything visually needs to be cleaned up. You do not need to have mold growing in your house, in your crawl space. It can, in the crawl space, it's actually eating your wood, and feeding off your wood. So, all of that needs to be cleaned up.
So if someone had run into a situation like that, and they've already reached out to, a restoration company and been told, we've inspected it and this is what we found, what do you recommend at that point? Do you recommend they get a third party inspection, or what's your recommendation?
Yeah, if they've already had a third party inspection that doesn't do restoration, that's, I'd say stick with those results. But if they haven't had a third party, and I'm only referring to things that are not visual. Okay. So right. If you go into a house and there's visible mold growing on drywall, that needs to come in. Right. Yeah. You need to have restoration done. But if you don't have anything in your house, and a company is telling you you need to do this, this, and this without testing, I wouldn't do that.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you what, let's step outside the business for a moment. You mentioned you have a wife and some children. So tell me, what do y'all do fun when you're not at work, Chris?
Well, we're super involved in, everything's around the kids now, which is good. And my kids are super involved in sports, and if baseball season, we're playing baseball. Basketball, we're playing basketball. Like to do anything outside. Me personally, I like to fish a lot and hunting season. I go back to Mississippi a lot in hunting season. So.
Oh yeah. Whitetail?
Yes, sir. Yeah. All the above.
So. Yeah. I'm from North Alabama. I know all about that. Where I grew up at, a little place in Alabama, they said it's the capital of whitetail deer in Alabama. So
yeah.
I'm going to get just a little bit more personal. Can you, back through your lifetime, your career, whichever one you want to relate to, can you describe maybe a hardship or life challenge that you have come through, that now looking back, that since you rose above it, you can see that it's made you stronger, better person?
That's a hard question. I think definitely been through, anything hard, I think is really good for you and makes you stronger.
Yeah.
For example, when I opened my business in February of 2020, put everything on the line as far as money's concerned, and just moving here and opening up the business, and then COVID hit in March, and everything was shut down. And I was so focused on trying to get my business open that I wasn't really aware of what was going on around as far as like stuff shutting down. And so I walked in, I was getting out networking, walked into an insurance office, and they told me to get out real quick. And so I remember going home and telling my wife, like, this could be a big problem. But, luckily we made it through that. And I think if I can make it through that and that year, we can pretty much go through anything.
Well, that's good to hear that you survived that. And it's so funny that you say February of 2020. I don't know how many people I have interviewed on podcasts that told me they opened their company February of 2020. And the next month, the shutdown happened.
And for whoever thinks that those people got a lot of COVID relief money, they're wrong if you opened up in February 2020. So, some of my friends that own businesses got a ton of help on that because they've been in business for years, and but nobody that just started had help at all.
Well, getting back to the business again for a moment, if there was one thing that you wish our listeners knew about, about Chris Pridgen, AdvantaClean of Chattanooga, one thing, and they wouldn't know it unless you told them, and you like to shout it from the rooftops, what would that be, Chris?
I think customer satisfaction is by far like my biggest priority. I think there's a big stigma in the service industry. You're going to get a couple guys rolling up with smoking cigarettes, cussing, walking into your house without booties on or whatever it may be. I want the customer to feel very happy at the end. And I take it very personal. Like, I want to see in their face or hear it on their voice on the phone that they're satisfied with what we did. And if they weren't, I want to make that right. And of course, you're going to have problems that happen sometimes, but I want them to really know that we really want for them to have a good experience with us, and to know that we're going to do quality work.
I'll never forget the first time that a service industry that I had called to my house to give me an estimate or do work, whatever it was. I'm struggling now to remember if it was a plumber or electrician, but this is years ago. And I'd only ever seen those booties you're talking about wore, and like people going into surgery in the hospital. I didn't know anybody else wore them, and they stopped before they walked in my front door and put them on. And I thought, wow, I mean, that really impressed me that they cared that much. And, down through the years since then, I've had a lot of people in my house that never even wiped their feet. Much put that on. So, yeah.
In my opinion, it should totally be expected. I mean, if you're going into, somebody hired you to do a job and it's coming into the place where you live, then you should treat it with utmost respect. And that's with everything. If you're the way you're stacking trash out in somebody's yard, are you cleaning up? Are you communicating that you're coming to their house or leaving their house, and just let them in the loop, the whole time that's going on.
I agree with you, man. I think it should be a huge consideration, a very, very large consideration. But, well, hey, Chris, I know a lot of people are probably wondering, how in the world do I get a hold of this guy? So if you don't care online and offline, just tell us the different ways people can go check you out and contact you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can reach me at AdvantaClean.com/ChattanoogaTN, or if you just AdvantaClean.com, it'll pull up my site. You can reach me at 423-718-4565. And you can find us on social media, Instagram. We're trying to be more active on Instagram, so you can see all of I like to post pictures of actual work that we do and technicians that work with me. And so you can see all of our work on there. We're on Facebook and all of that.
Okay. Hey, Chris, it was great meeting you today. Thanks for being on the program with us.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Hey, and all the good neighbors of the Chattanooga area, we, after meeting with Chris and learning more about AdvantaClean of Chattanooga, I know that he hopes that you'll take a moment to consider him anytime that you need or want the products and services that he provides. And before ending this episode, I'd like to thank you all, the listeners, for taking the time out of your busy day to visit with us at the Good Neighbor Podcast. Always remember to support the locally owned and or operated businesses in the greater Chattanooga area, all the way from Cleveland down to Dalton and all the small communities and not all just small communities. I wish there was time on the program to mention every little town and community, but y'all know I'm just trying to give a geographical outline. You're all important. Every business and every one of those little communities are important. So this is Scott Howell with the Friends and Neighbors Group. Everyone go out and make this a remarkable day.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnpcleveland.com. That's gnpcleveland.com or call 423-380-1984.